All right, welcome. Let me just get you guys muted. Okay, so this is our last talk for the year, and I had a little different plan. A lot of things I can talk about. When it's end of the year, I kind of like to do a bit of a review, and wanted to get a little feedback from you guys, actually. 2020 and 2021 were quite different. And, you know, more people are leery in the martial arts, especially if you're watching the news. So I don't want to get into that stuff on here, but it's just that a lot of concern for people. So a lot of people I haven't seen for a long time, and I'm interested. You guys always show up for Thursday. So I wanted to ask first, and maybe have each of you just give your own quick story, short story. Why did you start? What's your background in martial arts, and why did you start? So what's your background in general? Like, did you study for many years before you came to us, or are we the first school you ever went to? So who's first? Age before beauty? Oh, you're beautiful, Mr. McEwen. All right, go ahead.
During my police academy training, there was a lot of hands-on training for jiu-jitsu, and they had other people come into the academy and do talks and demonstrations. One gentleman, he was my height, about 5'10", but he's like 240 pounds. And he had these Filipino fighting sticks that were like 3 feet long, and he had one in each hand, and he moved around so gracefully, so fast that I was astonished by it. It was like, that really impressed me. And then I took some Taekwondo for a little while early on.
As a kid or as an adult?
No, as an adult. But then I was still working rotating shifts as a police officer, and it was just tough to to keep up with the classes because every week my schedule would change, and I was getting frustrated just trying to keep up with the classes. So I came to Wu Dragon about 15 years ago, and I was there for about 9, 10 months. I still had the same problem at your school with my scheduling. So I dropped out there, but once I retired, I took a year off, and then I went to your school to start over.
So the sticks came first. You were just impressed how the guy moved. Is that what you're saying? And then
that really impressed me.
Taekwondo just as a school that was close by or something?
Yes, it was in Bergenfield. Remember the old Sears Roebuck by the high school in Bergenfield? Yeah. It was a Taekwondo place in that little shopping center.
Okay. And then why us? Maybe a little more. You came back. I mean, your schedule didn't work, and then when you retired, you came to us instead of just someplace else. So tell me a little bit about that.
The Taekwondo and all the other martial arts schools, there was no sense of spirituality to it. There was no, the meditation and all that. That's really got me a sense of being spiritually and mentally connected. It wasn't just martial arts. That was, that would help me as a police officer to help to defend myself, but it was much more deeper than that. And that's what I really needed.
Beautiful. Do you see any, any example how it's how it helped you in your day-to-day life? Since the spiritual was more beneficial, is there an example how it benefited you outside the school?
Oh, absolutely. It's being, always a bit anxious and high-strung and being impulsive with my emotions, and that has changed my life tremendously. Now, worry a lot less, and just as you discuss from time to time, is the only concern yourself with things that you have under your control. Stop worrying about things that are out of your control. That type of philosophy. So that's I would have to say that the spiritual and the meditation has helped me much more than anything else. Plus, you've done a great job with me with the acupuncture.
Thank you. All right. Who's next? Who's more senior? Mr. Avilés, maybe?
Yes, sir. I told a story a couple months ago. When I was still working in the city in Manhattan, I'm an electrician. I was in construction, so the jobs that I would work on would have, sometimes hundreds of men on it, and I'd be waiting outside in a line trying to get into the building. It was hard enough normally to get to work, but now with the restraints, it took like an hour to get up into the building. And like every day, they put the gun to your head. People never had any fevers. I would always ask the people at the door, like, how many fevers have you had since this started? It was always zero. People would come, they would just sign the paperwork, whether they were sick or not, didn't matter. And, Mark Twain's birthday is the same day as my birthday, November 30th. So I like reading his literature. And there was something that stuck out to me. One of his quotes is, when you find yourself on the side of the majority, it's time to pause and reflect, or it's time to reform or pause and reflect. And when I saw that everybody was doing the same thing, it just got to me, because it's like the lemmings chasing each other off a cliff, So I kind of run counter to that. And also, not only is Mark Twain's birthday the same as mine, but Winston Churchill's also. And he had a quote about how he always goes against the stream or something. But so I stopped wearing the mask. It was really aggravating me, because things that I would see, and just, in construction, you wear masks when you're core drilling or hammer drilling, and that's to prevent the silica dust and everything. And even when I would have to wear it, it was an inconvenience, because you have your goggles on, they're fogging up on you, you can't breathe, and it gets like musty after a while, and it prohibits you from breathing. So it's like, I'm not going to do that all the time. Take the risks of getting sick. So one morning, I'm waiting for the elevator. Only 3 people are allowed in the elevator. You got a line down the hall of people trying to get upstairs. And I was just kind of going off on a rant. And then this one guy was like, "You're not getting on here with me." So me being a smart aleck, I proceeded to get on. And he kind of gave me the elbow, and kind of pushed me off. And it was funny, because it's like, you're so scared of me breathing near you. Why would you come closer to me? It's like that cognitive dissonance. So again, my pride was hurt, because then one of my coworkers was like, "Oh man, I can't believe you let him do that." It's all the pride, and, he disrespected you. But it's like, I let him take the elevator up, and I just got on the next elevator. But it hurt your pride to not like just, jump at the guy. But I exercised restraint, because again, it was that, the way the city was and everything. Everybody was emotional. And granted, something could have happened in this guy's family. Somebody could have died in his family.
He was a stranger?
Yeah, it was a stranger.
You didn't know
But
him?
And on the elevator, because there were like several floors being done in this building, I'd never seen the guy. And he was saying how he was going to have his friends come jump me after work. I'm like, don't you want to stay away from me if I don't have a mask on? But it was just funny. But so then it's kind of eating at me a little bit. So I was like, man, I wish I could have just done something, and like, just like him like flown past me and like look like a fool, because like I said, I was watching a lot of Ip Man movies during like COVID and stuff. I got rid of cable, because again, all that stuff's programming, and I would go to Bergenfield Library and rent DVDs and stuff. So I got the Grandmaster and like all the Ip Man movies, and I just liked how stoic he was, and how he was just that old school stoic character. And like, he taught people, you'd have like the young bucks trying to like impress him, and he would make them look foolish, but not intentionally, just to humble them, and just the way he fought, how graceful he was and everything. And then you had said, when I met you the first time for testing, how in Grandmaster, the woman that he, crosses paths with throughout the movie, studied Bagua, and she was like, her father was a Bagua master from the north. And I thought that was awesome, that I found this school. And initially I wanted to study Wing Chun, but obviously there was something to the school if she was able to defeat him, you know?
Mhm.
And I, even before I moved, like when I was looking at Greenville, I saw they had like 2 Wing Chun schools down here. And I looked at them and I just saw how like the website, it was like the Sifu there. It's all about him and like pictures of him. And I just looked at your website, how it's the students and like you're in the pictures, but not really. It's not all you. It's not about like ego. I feel like with your school, I think you get that, and like I saw that in other schools, and with the training, obviously doing the Zoom is a little more difficult because you don't have the hands-on, correction and stuff. But I think it's worth the pursuit. The one thing I was curious about, because in the new lesson that I was reading, it said, the dojang is the place of enlightenment. So how do you feel about that in regards to people doing Zoom, trying to learn the art through Zoom? Is that a feasible pursuit, or is it something? Is it better to like try to go to another school, even if it's a different style? Because I love this style. I don't want to do that. And I'm
Well,
content even if it takes longer to learn. I'm not. I just enjoy the learning, even if it's at a slower pace because of my limitations with the Zoom.
Well, let's back up a little bit. So my question is, why did you start? Did you do martial arts at all growing up or any other time?
I did nothing.
Okay, so this is fairly recent, this situation in the elevator. And like what, a year
Yeah,
or two, 2 years ago?
It was last November. So I turned 40. And again, I turned 40. So like midlife crisis, full on with COVID and everything. And I was like, I need to change, especially because everything was shut down. Like, I coached basketball and baseball in Bergenfield, and like nothing was going on. All we were doing was we were going to like Flat Rock and Greenbrook Sanctuary hiking, like on the Palisades. Like that was our entertainment during COVID, which was great. But I saw that you guys had reopened. I was like, let me get in there.
And that was the first class you ever took in martial arts?
Yep.
At 40 years old?
Yep.
The reason I'm reacting like this is because, and this goes to that guy in the elevator, this is people's maturity or lack thereof. You're telling a story like maybe most people experienced high school or something, like as a kid, the bully, somebody entering your space and you not knowing what to do. Because real briefly, I mean, it's in my book, but my first time I really got dealing with a bully was 10 years old, where a guy older and stronger than me just came out of his house, and he was, let me switch this. Not fair if I have your face on there all the time. Not fair for you. Ooh. Okay, so yeah, 10 years old, I'm on my front lawn playing whatever as a kid, and a neighbor came out of his house. Just, I didn't really recognize it at the time, but of course I went through my mind many times. He was obviously very upset. And I said, hey, how you doing? Because I knew him. And he just proceeded to come over onto my lawn and beat the living snot out of me. I mean, my eye was closed up. If you saw the old Rocky movie, it was like swollen out to here. I just remember bang, bang, over and over, watching that fist come at me, and I couldn't do anything. So I'm 10 years old, you're 40 years old, and you're telling, it wasn't, you didn't get beat up like that, but it's the same kind of thing. And then the guy threatens that he's going to bring his friends. It's like going to get you after school. These are things kids grow up with and talk about it. But I just found it so interesting that you experienced that at 40, when people don't realize who don't experience that can be any time in your life, because a lot of people just never mature. The ego runs everything, and they think that violence is the answer. So my inability to control the situation, yes, it drove me, and my parents, for whatever reason, couldn't sign me. I remember visiting a school as a kid and then not signing up. So I have no idea what happened there, if it was money or what, or maybe the schedule, they couldn't get me there. I have no idea. I just know I didn't sign up. And it wasn't until I met somebody in high school, what was I, 17? And then the story is more like what Mr. McEwen said, with the grace that the person moved with the sticks. And so I had a friend who actually is still a best friend of mine all these years. He was actually best man at my wedding, because he's the guy who got me started in all this. And I just went to a class one day. Like, first I was trying to learn from him a little bit, but he would talk about not having permission to teach, which I respected. And then he said, why don't you just come watch a class? And I watched the class, and I watched the way he can move. And he was already about 3 or 4 years in. And there's something that back then, I mean, this is early 80s, there wasn't really any Kung Fu. The only martial arts you saw, I mean, there was Bruce Lee in the TV, movies and things, but Kung Fu was very rare. So to watch the way he moved was kind of mind blowing. And then it was sort of like with those sticks, you want to be able to move with that grace. And it just, I fell in love with it. And I just started practicing, and I wear out the lawn in my parents' home. They were upset with me with that, because I just repeated things so many times that I would just, the grass turned to dirt in paths where I was moving. And so the drive was very similar to, you wanted to be able to control, if somebody came at you, you could just step aside and let his energy go, make a fool of him, let him make a fool of himself. And that's very much, when I think about it, was having that kind of control. It wasn't that I wanted to hurt someone, but I wanted to control someone who wanted to hurt me, or someone I cared about. And so I remember early on, before martial arts, how revenge was in my mind a lot. And my dad had taught me some boxing. He brought people to the driveway from the neighborhood, including that guy. And we fought with gloves on in my driveway, and people got all bloodied up. This is how he grew up in Jersey City. It was like the neighborhood would just get together and fight, like for fun. And that was a big confidence builder, because I did well considering what my dad had taught me. And then the martial arts, and then the philosophy. And it was very quickly that everything started changing in my mind. And it's like, the better you get at being able to fight, as people think martial arts is about fighting, the better you get, the less you want to. And that's where there's the morality in there, and there's the deeper philosophical aspects to that become even spiritual, because whatever you fully engage in is a spiritual experience, no matter really anybody's opinion. That's my experience. It becomes a spiritual experience on its own. And the more spiritual you become, the more connected to people you become. And in that process, why would you ever want to hurt someone? So yeah, I could see someone coming at you and being able to control them without even hurting them, possibly. I mean, there can come a time you don't have a choice with hurting them may be the only way to stop them. But yeah, you can have that kind of control. And even as a beginner, just sidestepping when the force comes in, we would teach all the way from the youth program through adults. When the train is coming, it doesn't matter how big and strong you are, you get off the tracks. You let the force go by. You learn how to neutralize the aggression and the energy and the attack. Basically, you move out of the way and you control the situation. So yeah, it's kind of a combination of both of your reasonings. But people don't realize that. So this guy tried to intimidate you in the elevator. You're 40 years old. Was he a much younger guy, by the way? You just said big guy?
He was wearing a mask. I couldn't tell.
Yeah, right. Okay, so people don't realize that the bullying thing is not just for kids. People go through college, maybe graduate school, or jobs, It could happen in relationships where you never really developed yourself. So there's no real confidence there. And so even a wife can bully a man. Many times it's the man bullying the woman, but it can go the other way. If the man is not confident, then the woman is always bossing him around and he just follows like a puppy dog, and then he's miserable inside. One martial artist I know was training in Taiwan, and he told a story. I may have told the story before, but anyway, he told the story how he would show up at his teacher's building late at night and he would see all the cars parked and running, and men smoking in the cars. Like all the cars had men in there smoking. And then one day he asked, he says, why do so many people sit outside your building and they're just sitting in their cars and smoking? He goes, nobody wants to go home to their wives. They're all stalling. They came back from work and now they don't want to deal with it. And that's what I mean. If you don't have the confidence to stand up for yourself, even in a relationship, you will be miserable and you don't really want to be in that relationship. And what kind of life is that? So how important is it really to know yourself? This training goes way beyond. So on the one respect, I said, learning how to fight makes me not want to fight. It's like having a gun. I don't want to shoot anybody, but I want to be able to protect myself. But translate that into maybe a boss, a manager, right? Or an elevator with a guy who thinks he can control what you do and not worry about himself. Anyway, martial arts is supposed to begin and end with respect. So I think you did something wrong there in the elevator. You agree? I think you realized it later. What do you think?
Yeah, I was being antagonistic. I was looking to get a reaction out of somebody. But again, going back to what I was saying with everybody just going in lockstep, I was like trying to get, I felt like I was the only person in that city that had my thoughts.
Everything else you said, I'm with you on all that. Yeah.
But I could have gone about it another way. I didn't have to be out there. I was just trying to see somebody be like, I feel the same exact way. And it's funny because one kid afterwards went, oh, dude, I agree with you completely. But, you gotta do it. You got to do it. But it's like, that's how this happens when everybody's just like, you know what, my job, this, that, the other. And then you see, obviously, there are people that aren't going to compromise. And again, I told you I was reading Atlas Shrugged. I got up to the part with who John Galt actually is. And there's the 6,000 people in the meeting and the children who took over their father's company are trying to impose like a communist kind of style of running the business. And he gets up and he's like, I'm not doing it. I'm leaving and I'm going to stop you. And they go, how? He goes, I'm going to stop the motor of the world. And that's kind of what's going on now. You just see all these people who are productive, who are the backbone of this country, who are like, I'm not doing it. I'm not compromising anymore, And that's why so many people, the people of value, not that people of value aren't staying, but there's a lot of people of value that are just like, I'm done. There's another path for me, and it'll present itself once I decide to step in that direction, Well,
that was exactly what I was saying before we started tonight. It's the Department of Energy and the possible dangers because they're stepping away from a very important job that only they're skilled to do. So yeah, exactly that. And that book is one of the greatest books of the century, if not of all time. Literally one of the greatest. And it's a lot of truth, and a lot of people on the other side don't like that book at all. Mm-mm. When they tried to make a movie, the actors all got blackballed out. They couldn't even get parts. So, Mr. Antomote, can you tell your situation?
Yes, sir. So I don't have any previous experience.
What's your age again?
So I'm 29.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't have any previous martial arts experience other than having taken one Taekwondo class several years back. You know, and then I guess as a young person, I kind of like Mr. Aviles, I've watched some films, martial arts movies, you know, Jet Li, Jackie Chan, you know, even another person named Tony Jaa. I don't know if anyone's familiar, but he does kind of like Muay Thai type of style. Not to say that I started practicing on the account of watching those movies, but more so maybe it's been in my subconscious to a certain extent. The reason why I came to your school is because Mr. Welch, he and I were co-workers for a short time in Hackensack at a restaurant in Hackensack called Maggiano's. And he worked in the banquet side, which is on one side of the restaurant, and I was a server. So I would see him from time to time. We would cross paths and kind of share words here and there. I always kind of noticed that he seemed a little bit different from everybody else. You know, body language, the way his demeanor was, you know. So we kind of naturally struck up conversation. And then eventually one time we got to talking about, I don't know how we got to the conversation, but he was like, you know, that's why the Blue Dragon School of Martial Arts is the best martial arts school. He said something like that. He said, you know, the first lesson that they teach you is how to overcome the ego. He said something along those lines. And although I hadn't practiced martial arts, I had my own run-ins with this concept of ego in relationships, you know. And so I was kind of, I think around this time when he and I had this conversation, I was already pondering what this means, the ego. Like having gone through a breakup, having been trying to learn stuff, trying to reflect, you know, all these things. But anyway, I asked him about the school, and I asked if he could tell me where it is, give me the address, all that stuff. So I came to the school, and then my first day at the school was I met Mr. Cunningham, and he kind of led the class for me. And what I noticed from the first class, what he was showing me like the warm-ups, you know. And the first thing that I picked up on was his body movement, and how his body movement seemed so fluid and connected. But what I really think I was noticing was the energy, that he was able to manipulate his energy in a certain way. And so I really wanted to try to learn that. And that's what really drew me in, was this idea of trying to hone my energy. And then this was during the pandemic, you know, and so it was giving me something to do, giving me a way to get out of, you know, to leave home. And I didn't know who you were at the time, sir, because you weren't there. So I didn't know who the master was or anything. And then I heard somebody say, you know, Shifu's coming back or something. I didn't know what that meant. And then everyone got excited. I said, oh, wow, that must be like the master. I don't know. But then, you know, once I started coming to meditations that you hold weekly, was when my mind started to open to the philosophic aspect of the art. And so that's what is also, I feel, is a big part of my continuation in this practice. First, it was the desire to really learn how to work with my energy, and then. But I still have a lot to learn, of course, you know, and very grateful for everything that I've learned thus far. So, yeah. I guess that's a short answer.
I love that answer. That was beautiful. Thank you. I feel I should go back to answer now. Everybody's okay. I feel like I should go back to because you asked a question about online training. Okay. First, let me say how powerful all of your messages were. That was great. I could have listened to that the rest of the night and not really said much else. But I'm really glad I asked this question because I don't think a lot of people realize why people practice and why they like our school, for example. Why like what's special? Is it special? What's the difference with school to school? But there you are down in South Carolina, and you keep coming online, and now you're asking, can that be done? Well, let me say this. Lu Tian, my grand teacher, okay, your great grand teacher, he traveled on horseback for, I think it was 2 days, 2 nights. He had to stay over along the way, and it was horseback way back early 1900s in China, Shandong province, and he traveled. Those of you who attended that seminar about the background, and he would go there and physically learn and practice, and then go home for months, if not years, and practice on his own, and then come back and train again in person, and then go back home. And his level of skill was second to none in the area, as far as I know, because there are stories of him. I mean, he took a cane once. He got mad at his son. His son was standing in front of a window, and he got mad at him, and he thrust his cane at him, and his son ducked out of the way, and he put a hole in that glass like a bullet. And his son was so excited. He says, oh my goodness, my father's skill. He says, how many people in the world do you think could do that? He didn't shatter the glass. He put a bullet hole in it, and that was there. It may still be there for all I know, but it was there for decades that people could see what he did. I mean, there are stories of him with a spear with Shizu Park. That's my teacher, right, for Changshan Bagua. And he upset him once. I think he was probably being a bad young man or something with others. Maybe a little bit of a bully or something. And when he got him in class, he taught him a lesson. I think he handed him a spear or something, and he had a spear, and he stuck his spear in his forearm. And every time, and no matter where he went, he kept the spear in his forearm, and he just followed him all over the place. He couldn't get away, and he was very highly skilled at the time. But this old man could just follow him wherever. He talked about controlling your energy. He could feel where he was going to go. You ever play a video game where it's like you move, but the video game moves exactly? It was like that, the way it's described to me. And he had this scar that he could show that that's what happened. Or he saw a fly. He just like popped it right out of right off the sill or something. It was just like the accuracy. The accuracy is one of the last things you train. Right? It's controlling your movement, controlling your body, controlling your mind, controlling your breath. You got to be able to control your power, and then exactly how precise you can move. You think about how precise you have to be. I think of someone like Stephen Curry throwing up his 3-pointers, right? He just like throws it up and walks away. He knows it's going in. It's how many shots has he taken to get that kind of accuracy? So how much practice did Lu Tian do when he left his teacher? Moral of this story is you're on your own to get the skills. That makes sense? And you can come by me. You already did it one time. So when the time is right now, you just got to keep working on the body mechanics, the movement. But there's a time you absolutely have to feel it. You absolutely have to feel it. And then you take that experience, and then you go home and you visualize like a boxer shadow boxing. You can't shadow box realistically if you've never been in a fight. if you've never been sparring, you can't imagine what the attacks are like, or what they feel like if you get hit and how you respond, unless you actually have that experience. So you have that, and then you go home and practice, whether it's weeks or months or even years, and then you come back, you learn more. This is a very old traditional way. If you couldn't live with your teacher in that locale, then you had to come from a distance and learn what you could over a short time, and then go home and then come back. And that was the process of learning. There's even a story of Lu Shietian when he was traveling like that. I think there was one story where he came across some farmers who he would call like what they did farmer style. That there was a lot of people who just like gathered techniques from traveling martial artists that they would run into here and there. And he showed him the basic dojang. You know, you throw the palms like in the basic class. And he just told them, you know, a few hundred times a day, you just practice this. And then he came back years later, and this guy saw him and he said, I have to show you. And he could strike an animal and it's like, you know, done. You know, something like that. Where, talk about controlling your energy. He could create a vibration when he hit that. I mean, there's stories of, I think it was a sheep and definitely a dog. I mean, the dog was kind of a mean situation. I think the dog just bothered the person who did it. It may have been one of those revenge type things where it was like the boss's dog or something and he was angry. But the power of the palm, he hit the dog and the dog died like 3 days later. Like it was internal bleeding or something. So they have examples like this where people did this and it took a few days. It's almost like an infection, because you create such a vibration that blood vessels burst, and then internally you're very sick and you can pass if it's in the wrong spot. So that was one of those not so nice stories, but it does tell that the results of just practicing work. And that's the thing. I mean, I wore out the grass in my parents' yard because I loved it so much. You do have to love it. Personally, 6 months after I started, I knew I wanted to do this for the rest of my life. And I dedicated my life to teaching, training to the point where I could give you the real stuff, the right stuff, you know, not just passing along. Well, as my teacher said, you know, it's like you have a big meal. You can't just pass it on to someone else. You're supposed to chew it one bite at a time. You put it in your mouth and chew it and digest it. So you understand it completely before you pass it on. You have to digest it. So I committed to that, to always bring the best stuff and to not waste your time. But time is something that's tricky because people are in such a hurry. It's like you think you're going to learn something like this, and that's impossible. Kung Fu literally translates, and I'll give my extended definition. It's like time and work, 2 words, but it's like achievement through consistent effort over time. That in itself is a philosophy, how you approach things. There is no shortcut. There's efficiency. You remember the 5 ways you have to show up. You show up at your school, you show up in class, you show up in your practice area. You have to show up. You don't feel like it today. No, you have to show up. And then you get started. And then when you start, you get going, you got to train hard. You got to have the effort. And then over time, you learn how to be more efficient. So the closest thing to a shortcut is the consistency, but also doing it right. And doing it right changes because your understanding changes. But you get more and more efficient at how you practice. And then the time aspect. You got to have patience. It takes how long it takes. We all have different backgrounds. So your only competitor is yourself. Are you better this year than you were at the end of last year? You think about that. What did you learn over the last 12 months? So you gauge yourself year to year, not day by day, week by week, or month by month, year by year. And now we're going into 2022. You make the most of that year, 1 year at a time. And that's how it really changes lives. And then, of course, we say the most important thing, the hardest thing, and the most important thing we do is the meditation. And to me, martial arts without meditation isn't real martial arts. You have to get control of your mind. Martial arts without meditation, without control of the mind, without control of the ego, can be violent. Yeah, you can make a lot of bad decisions. I've seen martial art, people who practice combat sports, MMA, things like that, who will fight at the drop of a hat. Somehow this is, it's like they believe it's their badge of honor or something, that if somebody looks at them funny, they have to fight. Looks at their girlfriend, they have to fight. Everything's fight, fight, fight. It's craziness. The real martial artist, in my opinion, should be the least likely person to get in the fight. They know how to avoid the situation. They use wisdom, even benevolence. We talk about that. Benevolence is literally charity to someone, but it's caring for others. Without those things, I mean, when we talk sincerity, this is what I mean by, okay, you learn and then you go practice. You have to look yourself in the mirror and say, how much time and effort have I really put into this? Because you will literally, it is definitely one of those things, probably more than most, that will completely reflect what you put into it. What you get out is what you put in. Absolutely. So what you guys shared, why you're with the Blue Dragon, what you've heard about the Blue Dragon. I love what you said about Mr. Welch with, he was just a little different from others. This is a common thing. He grew up at the school since he's 3 years old. He didn't know any other way. Every day, 3-4 days a week sometimes, he was there and he was practicing and hearing that message. How does a kid grow up and not get that philosophy? That's like my son. He's going to naturally be different than others. Literally since 3 years old, he came all the way up to 16, training seriously. And that's a reflection when you talk about Mr. Cunningham. I look at Mr. O'Leary, Mr. Cetera. These are the senior students. They're a reflection of the truth of this art and the teachings because they made the effort. And then you guys telling your story, this excites me. When you show up to meditation weekly and you feel that you're getting something that helps your day-to-day life. This is why I do this. So I appreciate all of you. And let's go to meditation.